Hello, everybody. We'll just start in a minute or two. I'll just give people a little bit more time to show up. I'm just letting the meme-tage play in the meantime. I'm kind of proud of it. I've been collecting these for a while now. It's definitely better than just having nothing for this and when I'm doing just kind of a vocal part of my show. So, yeah, I'll start talking about the study in a moment. I'm just here chilling out with Rain. She's just rooting around, playing with plastic bags and that kind of thing. Hey girl, how you doing? I don't know. She's just stalking around. So yeah, I don't know. I've been pretty depressed lately. Unemployment's really rough. I've just been trying to find a job, but I mean, it's as I said, it's a very difficult place out there. Difficult economy, difficult. I don't know. It's rough. Sorry that this took so long. If you haven't done like survey or like polling work or any of this sort of thing before, you have to understand that when you get the actual data, like you pull it down, it doesn't come in like a usable format. You have to like go through it and do a whole lot of recoding, and a lot of people put answers in the other category, and I had to go fix those things and kind of just do stuff like that, and that's all just is very time consuming. So it just kind of took a while, and I admit I haven't been like super I don't know, motivated in general lately. I think I've been putting out content pretty consistently. There's no point to doing. We'll get into it. There's no point to doing race ethnicity because everybody put white anyways. So that being said, let's get started. Okay, everybody. So welcome to the third annual. I can't believe we've reached 3 years on this. The third annual Dissident Rights Survey. Or as I call it, the Argent Study of Alternative Political Views. I just did that because if people didn't consider themselves dissident right, I still wanted them to participate. Because there's a lot of people I know who watch me or watch other people who might not identify as being right-winged or a traditionalist or a conservative or whatever, but who are in these kind of spheres and they share the memes and they're kind of part of the general political culture. And that kind of thing. So that's why I kind of put it dissident or political views, that kind of thing. So I didn't get quite as many this year. Like I said, I admit I've been kind of feeling kind of depressed and somewhat lazy. So I didn't really shill as hard as I could have. We did get pretty good results, though. So I got 1,060 responses. I probably got more, but that's what I pulled this at, and I didn't really want to pull it again because then I'd have to go through and recode a bunch of shit. Like I said, this stuff takes a really long time to do. Especially when I'm using something ghetto like Google Forms. I guess I could have like paid money to use an actual survey platform, but I don't know. It is what it is. Nothing I can do, but I digress. So, I just wanted to. I listed myself here. Wow, that was good. So, I just wanted to thank a couple people. So, I think Fritz shared it. The distributors shared it. I think Beckloff did it on screen. Serp did it on screen. I obviously did. I think there was a couple other people. Like I said, I kind of didn't shill it quite as much, but we still got a pretty good outcome. So that being said, let's get into this. So let's start out with demographics. So of the people who took this, 96% were male, 3% were female, and I had an other category, and about 1% put trans. I think it was 0.4%, but it's funnier to round it up to 1%. So we had about 1% for trans. So interestingly, and I've known this for a while, my viewership is mostly 18 to 24 and then 25 to 34. Obviously, I'm in this age group, but that's not really surprising. It is good to see that I don't have many under 18. I don't really like, it's not that I don't appreciate the views. It's just I kind of don't want to like be responsible for getting like basically people who are kids who can't really, aren't really, I think, old enough or mature enough to make really complicated life decisions to kind of get them on to jump on board something that'll potentially really alienate them from society and could have really negative impacts on their future career and that kind of thing. Oh, sorry, Zoomer Vince. But that's always just kind of a concern I have, and maybe that's fair, maybe that's unfair. I don't know. That's just the way I feel. Age 35 plus, not many. Okay, so race, region, and ethnicity. This is why I can't really do a breakdown of religion or political ideology by ethnicity, because 82% of people put down white. It's always funny when you go through it because like people will just put, I don't think I did this time, but last year I had a couple people put gamer down, which I recoded as white. And some people put down like Asian or American or that kind of thing. For those of you who are under 18, that's fine. I just, I don't know. I just feel kind of worried about it. But I feel kind of worried and guilty about a lot of stuff that I shouldn't. So we have obviously 82% white, 6% put mixed race, 4% put Hispanic, and there is just kind of a smattering of other stuff. I think some of the people who put Jewish, I'd have to run a cross tab, but I think some of them just put it as like their ethnicity, but not their religion. So I do think I have a couple, viewers who are ethnic Jews, but are either non-religious or Christian. I think I have a couple religious Jewish viewers. But obviously the vast majority are from North America. People always put stuff down for this. Like, I know like Australians complain that I have Oceania. Like, I'm bad today. Oceania. Aussies will complain about that when that just is the name for like that part that includes, I think it's Guinea, Australia, New Zealand. But yeah, it's mostly North American. Okay, so I also just asked some basic demographic questions because I'm kind of interested, because there's always a sort of thing here that we have, that it's neat socks, that most of the viewership is neats. So this is about what one would expect for this kind of age group. A plurality were either attending school or in an apprenticeship or an internship, so some sort of job training, or they were employed part-time. There was a couple people who wrote in, I'm employed part-time while attending school. So, I mean, I get it that these are not mutually exclusive categories necessarily. This sort of thing is very difficult, because I studied this in school and that sort of thing. It's difficult because there's like an unlimited number of categories you could come up with. Like, I think disabled and not able to work, a bunch of people just wrote that down. So I recoded them as that. And for some of these, I had to add additional categories for. So not that much of the viewer base are actually neats. I don't consider unemployed looking for work to be a need. That just means you're down on your luck or you're in between jobs. But yeah, considering the age group, that makes sense. Also, education levels. I think that's about what one might expect. Let me see here. Yeah, the percentage who put high school down is a bit almost exactly the same as the percentage who are within that age group. It seems like most of the people who graduated high school have gone on to some sort of post-secondary. So, okay, so now we're going to start getting into the spicy stuff. So this was, have you ever suffered from or been diagnosed with any of the following? So this is the mental health one. So these was a checkbox. So people could pick any number of different cases, or not cases, but conditions. So about a third said they had suffered from anxiety or depression. Now keep in mind, anxiety and depression in some cases are chronic or in some cases situational. So some people might have anxiety, like clinical anxiety, for a brief period. When, I don't know, like they have a new job or they're going to university or something and they need therapy and maybe a bit of medication to get through it. Some people have depression, like maybe a loved one dies or something like that, or they lose their job. And then there's people who have like natural chemical imbalances like I do, where that just kind of goes on. So we have that. We have learning disability. So that would be dyslexia, ADAD, ADHD. About 14% is Asperger's or autism. Now that seems really high, but let me just look this up. Okay, percent of population with Asperger's. I think that is actually really high, but keep in mind that it's somewhat inflated because this is like 98% male, and males are a lot more likely to have autism than females. I think it's like 4 or 5 or 6 to 1 in terms of male to female. I think I've only ever met like 1 or 2 women with autism in my time. So substance abuse, that would be drugs or alcoholism, bipolar, a psychotic disorder. I'm trying to remember what the difference was between cluster A. Right. A is schizoid, schizotypical, that sort of thing. And I think B is narcissism, histrionic, that sort of thing. Okay, so that makes sense. And then about 52% had not been diagnosed with any sort of mental illness. I get it that learning disability is technically not a mental illness, and that's autism can maybe is not exactly the same thing as depression, but whatever. So I think I had a bit less of a diversity just because I didn't shill this quite as hard as I normally did. So this one was really biased in terms of what I actually wound up getting. It was much, much more traditionalist and much, much more Catholic than what I normally got. That could also just be a change in the atmosphere. So I do think, like, if you look at organizations like America First, they're really heavily pushing conversion to Catholicism. So there's that case. So for political ideology, about 40% said traditionalist, 27% said uh, third position. Then there's broadly right wing, conservative, libertarian. So a lot of people put in other like monarcho futurist or like white Sharia or like libertarian, but I like absolute monarchy. So I don't even remember, but I just had to go through and try to like put them in some sort of category. Um, so like to clarify, because I don't have it here, like next to third positionist, I had like fascist, nationalist, that sort of thing. Uh, Traditionalist is, well, traditionalist, so I don't know, distributist or absolute monarchy or something like that. Broadly right wing is how I described myself. Um, which is just you're not really sure if you fit in the other categories. And then, like, after conservative, I had, like, national conservative, social conservative, similar with libertarian. So, for the sake of this study, I broke everything down by these categories here. So, obviously, there is overlap, but yeah. So, then we have religion. So, it's always a little awkward whenever you're listing the names for things when it comes to Catholicism, because it's almost never called Roman Catholic Christianity, although it is a denomination of Christianity. So it's why you often will get people saying Catholic or Christian, with Christian meaning other denominations. But this time it was very heavily Catholic with 43%, then Protestant, agnostic atheist, Eastern or Oriental Orthodoxy, neo-paganism was just a blip on the radar. People sometimes wonder, other Christian means like non-denominational who don't consider themselves Protestant. Messianic Jews, if they want to put themselves in that category. Mormons sometimes will change that, or Jehovah's Witnesses will sometimes pick that, although I don't consider them Christian. Restorationists, just kind of like the odd, like Christian Science, just kind of the odd other groups. Philosophical theism was just a term I had for stuff like deism or perennialism, or things that do believe in some sort of supernatural reality, but aren't specifically part of a religion. Excuse me. Mormons don't identify as Protestants. Yeah, I don't know if they'd put down as other Christian, though, which was kind of what I was thinking. Okay, so let's get into this. So I divided everything by religion and ethnicity. And political view. So political ideology. So Catholics identified very strongly with traditionalism. Compared to my previous studies, a lot more people put traditionalist than conservative. I'm not sure if that just signals like a... Because keep in mind, this is not scientific, this is not representative, because this is just a convenience sample based on whoever I could get to take the study. So Catholics were very heavily traditionalist, which is not surprising because a lot of Catholics identify as being distributist or something like that. Eastern Orthodox was traditionalist and third position, which I think kind of makes sense to me. Because I think it is, I mean, well, Eastern Orthodoxy brought us like Nazbol, And a lot of Orthodox countries have some sort of socially conservative socialist party. So that's not very surprising. Protestantism is somewhat more libertarian and somewhat more conservative. But the problem we kind of have here is just a lot of people really didn't pick conservative. So that kind of makes it a bit difficult when the sample is so strongly skewed in one direction. I mean, keep in mind, this is a sample of like 1,000 people. So this is still like 100 and this is still like 90. So that's enough to draw inferences from. But it does really skew the overall numbers towards the Catholic or traditionalist position. So then we get atheist or paganism and neo-paganism is one of two which is very heavily third position, which is not surprising at all. And then atheist agnostic is much less traditionalist, which is also interesting. Okay, so religion. So the problem with this is, like I said, because Catholics are such a large percentage of the base, they're the largest group in most categories. So they're a majority of conservative and traditionalist pretty handily. When we get into third position, agnostics and neo-pagans take up a larger percentage of it. Catholicism's a lot smaller. And that's also the case with libertarianism, which seems to appeal a lot more to Protestants or atheists than it does to the other varieties of it. Let's see here. Then we have economy. I might have to double check that because that does seem a little weird. That more third position isn't neo-paganism. I guess just because very few people put neo-paganism down. I can't do ethnic composition because it's like 90. It's like 80. It's like 90% white. There's no way you can't do an ethnic breakdown. Like, it's 82%. The only ones I could do is white, mixed race, Hispanic, but that wouldn't be like accurate or fair because they're such small minorities. Okay, economic ideology. So, generally speaking, the two dominant groups we had were a regulated market economy, or what I'd call like interventionism, would be the paradox term for it, or religious or traditional economy, whatever that means exactly. Just with what Zorro's saying, I think there has been a movement a bit away from libertarianism over the last year or so. Because I know, like, Nick Fuentes has kind of moved against that, and you see a lot more people who are willing to say, like, you have to ban degeneracy or you have to deal with subversives, that sort of thing. Also, just Catholics are just very overrepresented in any kind of dissident right political movement, be it conservatism, well, maybe not mainstream conservatism, but like libertarianism or like third positionism. Catholics are very much overrepresented in those. I think part of that is just because most Protestant churches have taken unacceptable positions on a lot of moral issues. So if you want to be a Christian and kind of be in a dissident right movement, Catholicism's kind of the only game in town. So we have laissez-faire market economy, regulated market economy, which is basically what we have in a lot of Western countries. Like, I'd probably put America, Canada in this kind of category. State-directed market economy would be something like China or Japan or South Korea or Singapore or France during the 30 Glorious Years, that sort of thing. Then you have central planning, a religious or traditional economy, uh, but I'm not entirely sure what that means. Like I said, I've been meaning to read a book about Sharia financing. I'm reading a book actually now about Soren Kierkegaard, so I might have to do a video on that, but it's going to be kind of incoherent because his life was very incoherent. Yeah, so religious or traditional economy, and then post-industrial, which is kind of like, I guess, kind of like cyberpunkish. So conservatives were more free market. Regulated market economy seemed pretty good. Traditionalists obviously wanted a traditionalist economy. Third positionists were like the only group that really strongly favored state capitalism. They were the only group where some of them stated that they wanted central planning. Broadly right winged was pretty kind of evenly all over the place, and libertarians obviously wanted a laissez-faire economy or a cyberpunk economy. Okay, so then the next one is how did you find these political circles? So the problem with this is a lot of people wrote in the other and wrote down multiple responses. I didn't really want to do multiple responses for this because I was trying to kind of come across what was the first main thing that kind of introduced you. So the major one was YouTube, and then kind of the other social media platforms. There wasn't really that many who said somebody I knew in real life. There was a couple people, like one person said growing up around black people was one of them. But generally speaking, it was people who had seen something on YouTube, Facebook, some sort of thing. So, I mean, the social media stuff does matter, as this is what it's telling me. Compared to, I think what the impression people sometimes get is pretty much, probably I think 80 to 90% of people here found out about this kind of stuff from some sort of online thing. So, then we have by the different groups. So I don't think this matters a ton. Conservatives were a lot more. Conservatives and libertarians were a lot more from Facebook, which I don't think is very surprising because those are more tolerated on Facebook, that sort of thing. Third position is being more from poll, I think also makes sense, which is kind of funny. It's funny whenever reality aligns with memes. Then again, most stereotypes and most memes and that kind of thing are based on reality. So, Rain's just staring at me, wondering why there wasn't any questions about cats. I'm sorry, girl. There will be next time. Let's see here. Okay, so that's about all the interesting things here. And then religiously speaking, interesting that neo-pagan's that high. I don't know. I don't have a ton to say there. Within the description of this video, there should be a link to my Google Drive, and there is the tables there, and this PDF is also there. So the crosstabs probably have all the stuff that you're looking for, because they have every question broken down by like everything. So definitely go check that out if you're interested. Okay, so let's get into parents' views. Let's see here. What am I doing again? Okay, so I don't really know like how to even start with this. So this is what people put down for what their parents' views were. Um, so this is a little hard to read. So this is somebody who said either one of their parents or both of their parents put that down. So that's why this adds up to over 100%. So about half of people said their parents were conservative. At least one of their parents was conservative, and then another half said their parents were liberal or centrist. There was not many people who had really left-wing parents. I mean, I guess it depends how you want to view liberal, but definitely the mothers were more right wing, more left wing. So like broadly left wing is mostly mothers, centrist, liberal. Whereas when we get into kind of conservative or third position or some of this other stuff, it's interesting because you see certain ideologies here are just not mainstream at all. Like conservatism's very mainstream, liberalism is, centrism is, but like no one basically put down third position. I mean, I don't know who other than like if Serp has kids or like Culture Thug's kids would really put third position down. So this was. I'm trying to remember. What was this? I don't even really remember what this was. I think I screwed up the labeling on this one. I think this was supposed to be. Yeah, okay, I reversed the labeling on this. Okay, that's my bad. I'll go back and fix this at some point. So this was supposed to be either parent, and this is supposed to be the total sample. So, generally speaking, with the exception of broadly right winged, there was more people for the various categories who put put it down than did parents. Okay, so this is the parents' views of people who express conservative views. So generally speaking, about half of them had conservative parents, so that's pretty interesting. Not some of them had liberal parents, but it does seem like it is at least somewhat genetic. Because I mean, if you add this together, a lot of people had some sort of conservative influence in their lifetime. Let's see, traditionalist. So people who identified as traditionalist, interestingly, they didn't really have, very few of them had traditionalist parents. So it seems to kind of be something that they picked up later in life, um, rather than earlier on. Uh, did I just not label this one properly? Oh, for third position. Okay. So third position, once again, this is something that's not really inherited as much. Interestingly, more of the people in the third position state they came from liberal households, like quite a bit more than people from the other two groups. So that's kind of interesting. Um, I don't have really a ton to say about this kind of thing. It's just kind of like there's a lot of data here. So I don't know if someone else wants to comb through this. But part of the problem is just such a large percentage of people's parents were conservative that kind of tends to be the dominant position. Although it does vary quite a bit when it comes to things like liberal. So, Direction of political views. So this is what I ask people. Do you think that your political views have become more or less radical in the last 5 years? It's kind of difficult picking a thing, but I don't know. It kind of makes sense. 5 years are roughly the last election and the year before the last election. So, more than three-quarters of people said that their views had become more radical, which is pretty much the entire sample. This is especially true from anyone who wasn't a conservative. Not that many people expressed becoming less radical, kind of an insignificant portion of the study. So, this does show that things are kind of moving in a particular direction. Let's see here. Did I screw this one up? Or okay, no, it's just weird in PDFs. So, with regards to religion, it's been pretty similar across the board. I don't think it's like immensely different here. I guess atheists have become somewhat less radicalized. I guess also libertarians and conservatives. So I guess people with more extreme views, probably because they came from conservative or libertarian. But even in that case, people with more mainstream ideologies have become a lot more radical. I know I've been seeing that just in the last like 3 or 4 months. Like a lot of people I knew who were kind of like moderate, like just kind of normal social conservatives, kind of like 90s conservatives, something like that. Because of the riots and Black Lives Matter and pulling down the statues, they've like gone really, really radical to the point where they almost want to form death squads. Just because they're really angry about what's happening, which I 100% understand. That sort of thing. Okay, direction of history. So this is kind of interesting. So this was the 4 different views of history that I put forward. Some other people put other, and I tried to fit them into a category. So so half, I guess maybe a majority, depending on how you round it, stated that history was cyclical. So progressive means that history is on a net course towards becoming better. That is, things have gone better. There may have been hiccups. It may have been gotten worse at some point, but overall the direction of history is better. Regressive means that overall the direction of history is negative, that there was some sort of golden age or golden era and the world's been decaying and the world will kind of continue to decay until it ends. Cyclical is where the earth goes through phases of decline and fall. And then dynamic is the answer I came up with, is kind of my view, which is there's not any particular direction of history. It can progress, it can regress, that sort of thing. Which I think largely kind of makes sense. Because I think like some things have gotten better. Like people aren't really starving. We can treat a lot more diseases. You have stuff like air conditioning. The murder rate is a lot lower than it has been in some previous ages. But you also have a lot of degeneracy and that kind of thing. So I think it's just kind of a mixed bag. But yeah, traditionalists were more likely to say regressive, and I think that's why their cyclical wasn't higher. But yeah, it's not too big a difference across the board. When we get into the different types of religion, there's some more there's a bit more variety. So neo-paganism, almost all of them put cyclical, which I don't think that's very, because you have people like Evola. I don't know if Evola would be in this or this category. It's not really important, but who put some sort of cyclical view down. Almost none of them kind of had an outside view of it. Then we have Catholics were kind of, well, the sample is basically the same as Catholics because Catholics are half of the sample. Orthodox is basically the same as Catholic. Most of the Christian groups were pretty similar. Because of Evola, these groups tended to be more cyclical. Okay, so now we're going to get into the lull Mimi part of this study. And this is how people viewed privilege. So this is I have two groups of this. I asked people to do a scale. So this is where the very and somewhat privileged are combined, and the somewhat and very disadvantaged are combined. So 83% of the study thought that Jews were privileged in our society. Virtually no one thought they were disadvantaged. Global Homo, 82% thought were privileged. Virtually no one thought they were disadvantaged. An overwhelming majority thought that women were privileged. Almost no one thought they were disadvantaged. Blacks were a little bit more varied, which I think kind of makes sense because even if they do have a lot of like privileges, like being able to burn down cities and loot without getting arrested, they still do kind of live in hellish circumstances in a lot of cases. So that kind of makes sense, but still, the general impression is they have a lot of privilege. Muslims are interesting because, to a certain extent, at least was for a long time, like you couldn't criticize any of these groups, but you could be openly anti-Muslim. So I think that kind of makes sense. Atheist agnostics being kind of in the middle, I think also makes sense. Because they do have privileges in terms of like their position at university faculties, the lawsuits that they do, those sorts of things. But at the same time, a lot of people really hate them, and they've kind of become a massive meme in the aftermath of the new atheist movement collapsing. So a lot of people just don't like them, which I think makes sense. Hispanic is interesting. A lot of people kind of put down neutral for Hispanic. I know the problem with Hispanics is it's like which Hispanic, like white Hispanics, like Cuban Hispanics. The other thing with atheism is atheism only appeals to like white people. It doesn't really appeal to anyone else, particularly white heterosexual, or not heterosexual, just white males. So I think it kind of almost eventually had to go on the way out. So so Hispanics are kind of in the middle, which I think kind of makes sense. Native Americans were very controversial because they do get a lot of privileges in terms of like things like school, scholarships, tax benefits, stuff like that. But a lot of them live in absolutely hellish circumstances, like as bad or worse than blacks. So it's interesting that it's so divided. East Asians had a large amount of neutral, because I think in general, I think East Asians, generally speaking, are just kind of there. A friend of mine was saying, like, the lizard people like when you get more diversity of this kind, this kind, this kind, and this kind. That's the preference. For Asians, it's just kind of, they're just kind of there. A lot of them just aren't that interested in politics. They're just more interested in, like, making money and their families. So they're just kind of like, yeah. Disabled people, most people agreed they were disadvantaged, which I tend to agree with. I put down disadvantage for it. They're like, if you want to call them a victim group that I actually do have sympathy for. Because as being someone who has like a disability myself, both in terms of being bipolar and having a learning disability, it does make life a lot harder, even if you do have a some sort of aid. And then you have white people who most people thought were disadvantaged. Very few people believed in white privilege. No one really thought that men were had an advantage in our society. I mean, look at this: women versus men. And then Christians were seen as the most disadvantaged. Now we're going to get into the breakdown of. Now we have the breakdown of the degrees of how privileged people think they are, or how disadvantaged people think they are. So when we look at Jews, 66% felt they were very privileged. So it wasn't even like the combining of it didn't even really matter. 2/3 felt that they were very privileged. And over half thought that global homo was very privileged. And then it kind of declines a bit where it's so much more mixed between women and blacks, where it's about 50-50 as to whether they're very privileged or somewhat privileged. With Muslims, it's interesting. Muslims, Hispanics, and Native Americans, where most of the people who thought they were privileged thought they had a slight amount of privileged. So, and then once we get into Christians, whites, and males, you get into, like, yeah, pretty heavily disadvantaged. Okay, so then we're going to talk about political parties. So this was kind of an interesting one. This is how people thought that kind of the political system should be structured. So you had free competition, have a dominant party system, which is more or less what South Africa, Singapore, Japan, some countries like that have, where there are multiple parties and there are relatively free elections, but more or less there's realistically only the Liberal Democrats are going to win. I think the Liberal Democrats have only lost 2 elections since they became the governing party of became the governing party. The ANC's never going to lose an election in South Africa. And kind of why people allow that is the idea is it allows them to propose policies or ideas, and it allows them to kind of hold the dominant party to account. Then a one-party state, and then there should not be any political parties. So I think this should be unsurprising. The conservatives tended to favor the status quo. They kind of favor the mainstream position because they're the most mainstream ideology we looked at. Traditionalists are very strongly anti-political party, probably because they want an absolute monarchy or something to that effect, or just the church to fulfill the position of a political party. Third position obviously wanted a one-party state. And then libertarians also were anti-party because they probably just think political parties lead to socialism. So then we get into this. So I don't know. It's not a massive amount of difference. I guess atheists tended to be the most liberal, whereas Catholics and Orthodox tended to be more, and other Christians tended to be more anti-political parties. So this is one I threw back in. I threw a couple questions back in because a lot of people were complaining that the survey was too short. I was trying to keep the survey relatively short because you had a couple really long questions in this. But people said it was like it was, so I just threw a couple back in from previous studies. And then people complained about those, but whatever. So the role of women's society should be, so this was affirmative action. So I think it was less than 1% supported affirmative action. And that was just from the liberals who took the study. None of the people who would identify as what would be considered a right-wing ideology picked that. Gender equality was popular with conservatives and libertarians. The other groups, the plurality position, seems to be what my position is, which is I don't really mind if women go to university or if they have some sort of professional job. I just don't think they should be able to vote, hold political power, or be in the military. That sort of thing. Also, I think if you look at studies, generally speaking, women will list the ideal number of children as being more than whatever it is they have. So I kind of feel if like women weren't being pressured like economically and socially, a lot more of them would not want to pursue a career. Or they'd like want to have like I don't know, like a not particularly skilled career and support their husband to support their household income. I think a lot of women would like to do that, and it's just the economic reality of the current age we live in makes that very difficult. That you kind of need two professional level incomes. I don't know, that just might be me and the kind of circles I move in. So, um, pagans and atheists were more feminist, which I think is funny. Nice meme, bro. The various Christians tended to have more patriarchal views. I don't mean that as like a negative. I just mean that as a descriptor. There's nothing wrong with patriarchy. Then we get into abortion, and I was actually kind of surprised how much, how strongly this went. So this was banned in all cases, excluding double effect procedure. So that's the Catholic Church's position. So if an operation needs to be had to save a woman's life, and the side effect of that is removing the child, or kind of like killing the child, then that is permissible. I had a lot of people who put I'm against double effect, even though that's the church's official position. So people were pretty strongly pro-life. I kind of screwed up the way I labeled this. So this was banned in one or more of the following. So that was rape, incest, threat to the mother's life, severe fetal defect, I think was the list, which is actually my position, although people say I'm pro-abortion for that. And then not many people were just pro-abortion in general. I always kind of like the meme of different views for abortion legality for other ethnic or racial groups. I like how many third positionists were like, it's okay if black people do it. And then we have a pretty... that's probably because Orthodox was so heavily third positionist. But Yeah, Catholics were very, very pro-life. Keep in mind, orange is what Poland's laws are, and a lot of other very conservative countries. So, yeah, Christians were pretty much generally pro life. Um, Pagans and philosophical theists tended to have more, I don't know if you want to say nuanced opinions on that or whatever. Okay, so this was preferred living environment. So this was another kind of interesting one. So this was where would you prefer to live? So rural area doesn't actually mean small town. It means communities of like less than 1,000 people. Sometimes not even really official towns, just people living out in the countryside. So I gave people three choices. So the preference tended to very strongly be small town or rural. Particularly small town was kind of like dominated. Most people really wanted to live in that environment. Very few people wanted to live in urban areas. And I don't know, a lot of people were lukewarm on the concept of the suburbs. Rural and small town, though, were the dominant ones. So if we look at preference to live, I don't know, it's not like massive. Um, it's weird that third positionist put rural, because third positionism is traditionally a more urban ideology. So I don't really get why, to be honest. It's kind of strange. But conservatives like the suburbs and libertarians do. Meme magic is real. Then we have small towns. Okay, so. All right, so we have the last couple questions, which are the really long. Um, we have the really long ones. So this is paranormal phenomenon. So I really struggled with this one, how to word it. So we had. Wait a minute, did I screw this up? Oh no, I didn't screw this up. Okay. So there was three categories: personal experience, believe but haven't experienced, and haven't experienced and don't believe. People wanted to put in some like other stuff, like somebody, but it was just getting too complicated, and that sort of thing. So we had an overwhelming majority believed in religious. So that would be like visions, visions from a saint or a vision from God, a saint directly intervening in your life, Mary intervening in your life, some sort of miracle. So interestingly, a quarter of the people who took the study had personally experienced some sort of religious miracle, which I think is pretty fascinating, to be honest. Similarly, demons or demonic activity was listed very highly on the list. Um, so, I mean, these are kind of like the same thing, I guess you could say, where demons or demonic activity is kind of a religious one. But I find there's a little bit of difference between it. Like, you'll have some non religious people who believe in demons, or you'll have people who have experienced demonic activity, but not like positive religious activity. Then we have ghost spirits or hauntings. And that is 50-50, which is kind of interesting. UFOs were once again kind of 50-50. Very few people had seen any kind of aliens. Then we get into natural cryptids, which I was kind of surprised from. Because I figured like more people would say like phantom big cats or something are real. People overwhelmingly pressed X to doubt on magic or psychic phenomenon. interestingly enough. I thought those would be higher. And then other supernatural creature would be was pretty low. People were wondering why Bigfoot was put as a other supernatural creature. To that, I would say you should ask Serp. He has like a big theory on how Bigfoot's a supernatural creature, that sort of thing. So I think that's pretty interesting. Then we have favorite fictional genres. Once again, this was kind of an interesting one. So people could select up to 3. So I don't think it's super surprising that science fiction was a majority of people. I think a lot of people in these circles like science fiction, be it something like Warhammer 40K or something more philosophical like Blade Runner or The Matrix or Star Wars or Star Trek. There's a video, I forget who it was, put out that nerds tend to either be really religious or really anti-religious. Because you have people like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, who I guess you could say were kind of nerds. I mean, Tolkien wasn't sci-fi, but he did like build like this. Well, he built what became D&D, basically. So, yeah. Historical fiction was actually higher than I thought. High fantasy was pretty high. Some people said low fantasy. Maybe I should have put low fantasy. I don't know. Action adventure. I guess these was also just kind of like a mix. This was a mixture of like film, video game, and movie genres. I'm surprised horror isn't higher. Because horror is a very like reactionary kind of right-wing genre, compared to a lot of other different stuff. So I figured that would be higher. Maybe a lot of people just don't like how much like nudity and like graphic violence there is in it, and that sort of thing. Then there's suspense thriller, which is a bit different than horror. Mystery, literary fiction. Literary fiction was actually something that I had to put in. I was just kind of going by what standard movie categories were. Romance was very low because a lot of the people on this list are incels or volcels. And then urban fantasy. I'm kind of surprised urban fantasy's not higher. So urban fantasy would be something like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Twilight or I'm trying to think of some other examples of it. What's it called? Dresden Files. Stuff like that. Anything that kind of takes place in an urban area and has things like that. A lot of, I mean, the line between urban fantasy and horror is a very, like, narrow one, where I think they can often kind of go from one to another. I guess it kind of depends as to whether or not it's trying to be scary or not. I mean, I'm like the one person who's a fan of Twilight in these circles. And part of that is just like a meme, but I legitimately really like the Twilight books. I read most of them in like a day or two. They're very wholesome in their own weird, kind of bizarro way. So I kind of like them. And then we get into musical genres. So we have rock is obviously number one because most people who did this are American. And rock music is kind of America's music. Classical / neoclassical, I consider like soundtrack or video game music to be neoclassical is how I describe it. Like, for example, I feel like something like the music in Dark Souls, I don't really see how you can't say that's a type of classical music. It even will have like Gregorian chant and like choral music and stuff in it. So I would consider like the music in Dark Souls to be neoclassical, the music in Zelda, maybe some of the stuff in Mario, stuff like Requiem for a Dream. I kind of put that sort of thing. So then we have metal, which I like. I put up a list of my favorite bands. You know what? While we're like talking about this, let's just do a complete 180, and I'll just put down what my favorite music is. So my favorite band is Judas Priest, then Sabaton, then Motoi Sakuraba. So he does the music for Dark Souls, Baden Kaitos, um, Dark Souls, Baden Kaitos, Lost Kingdoms, and like a bunch of other things. He does like a lot of the really good music. Then we have Crush 40, who does all the Sonic music, Queen, Hans Zimmer, Frank Klepacki, who does all the music for the Command and Conquer games, Blue Oyster Cult, Power Quest, and I'm sure this is going to be cringe, but I do also really like Cascada. That was something I kind of grew up with. I do like kind of like trance, really catchy stuff like that. So, yeah, so obviously for this one, people put like a ton of just random sub-musical genres or something. There's stuff like Dino Synth that I didn't put down here. And yes, Dino Synth is a real thing. Let me see if I can find the find it. Dino Synth. Okay, I can't find an image for it, but if you look it up, there is a thing for. I completely lost my. Vaporwave would be under electronic. So political, historical, or military. So that would be like the Soviet anthem. That would be like stuff from the Civil War. I know it probably irritates a lot of people. I really like. I do really like Marching Through Georgia. And a lot of Southern songs too. Like To Arms and Dixie is really good. Also, just like some of the military stuff, like the Army Goes Rolling Along, and like the Marine Corps theme, and stuff like that. Then we have folk, religious music, country western, jazz, rap, hip hop, parody, humor, meme, pop, and blues. So that is everything that I did for the study. So maybe I'll just take a couple minutes if people want to if people want to ask me some questions and that sort of thing. I mean, Blue Oyster Cult has a bunch of good songs. There's Don't Fear the Reaper. There's what else is there? Veteran of the Psychic Wars, Burnin' for You. There's a bunch of good songs. Oh, Soul Survivor. Hey, Rain, do you want to say hi? Can we get a meow out of you? Do I support trans rights? No. No, transsexuals are mentally ill. What's really funny is there's a Japanese version of Marching Through Georgia, Tokyo Bushi. Mm-hmm. I do really like, because I was rewatching Girls und Panzer, because I hadn't seen Girls und Panzer in a long time. Uh, And they actually have Panzer in it, which I was shocked by. They have Panzer and they have The Army Goes Rolling Along and a couple other songs like that. Let me see here. The Irish Volunteers is good. I'm just looking at some Civil War songs. Um, Bonnie Blue Flag is good. When Johnny comes marching home. The Army of the Free. There's a lot of good Civil Wars songs. Who's the best Girls in Panzer girl? I don't really know. The problem with Girls in Panzer is it's just really, really short and rushed. Like, it should have been at least 24 episodes. They just rushed through the season really quick, and I feel like a lot of the individual characters really didn't get much development. And it went by really, really quick. But I mean, it's cute high school girls in tanks, so I mean, it's kind of like it's got to be good. Um, I do love the Soviet anthem. The Soviet anthem is like has to be the best national anthem of all time. I'm glad that Putin brought it back with different lyrics. I'm also glad the new Russians anthem mentions God in it. But yeah, during the Yeltsin years, they had the nameless anthem or whatever. I don't really want to go into negative or positive rights at the moment. More just talking about the study and kind of stuff like that. So, I find it really funny that the KKK's theme song is in Fallout 76. Stand up and be counted. I think the best part of it, though, is when it said we must destroy the communists to save our Christian land, which is like one of the most base things ever. But that was a good meme that was in Fallout 76. Do you like Keep Your Rifle by Your Side from Far Cry 5? I don't really remember that. Far Cry 5 was like okay. I admit I didn't follow the plot like at all. I liked the plot in Far Cry 3 a lot and Far Cry 4 a lot. Far Cry 5 I was just not interested in. I think Far Cry it's kind of close between Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 4 because I think Far Cry 3 actually did a really good deconstruction of like the kind of white savior narrative and like the kind of power fantasy. And 4 I like just because it's such a location you never see. Like I can't really think of another video game that's set in the Himalayas. No, Mortal Kombat soundtrack is electronic. It's techno. It's I mean more like kind of like Zelda music or something like that. So, but yeah, I kind of wish that Girls in Panzer was like significantly longer than it was. I'm trying to remember, I've been watching a lot of animes lately. I watched Love Shinobu and Other Delusions, both it and the sequel, which I both really liked. I've been watching Toradora. I really, really hate what's her name. I really hate Taiga. I know a lot of people have her as best girl, but I really hate her. Um, she's really annoying. I like Ame a lot more. So I watched that. Um, I forget. There was a couple other. Uh, I rewatched Maid Sama, which I really like. I don't know. I don't really read manga, to be honest. I think there was a couple other animes I watched. There are some like bad ones I watched that I've repressed. Like Beyond the Boundary. Let me just look this up. I know we're talking about anime which has absolutely nothing to do with anything, but I mean it's my channel so I can talk about whatever I want to talk about, I guess. Oh, JoJo, right. I got through JoJo. I got through Stardust Crusaders, Battle Tendency, and Phantom Blood, and I'm like halfway through Diamond is Unbreakable. Diamond is Unbreakable is pretty good. I think it's probably the best one so far. Although I've heard a lot of people like Part 5. I was going to watch My Lie in April, but like somebody spoiled the ending, and the ending just sounded really, really um, depressing. Let's see here. Like the ending sounded like it just kind of retroactively ruined the rest of it. Let's see here. Ghost of Tsushima. Since we're just kind of shooting the shit at this point, I kind of want to do a video about Baked Alaska. The problem with Baked Alaska is like there's so many different places that all like his streams are located, and now his channel's been taken down. So I've been wanting to like do a compilation stream of like all the sociopathic shit that he's done, but it's like all over the place and it's shit's hard. What else have I been doing? I read the Blade Runner book, and I rewatched the movie, and I rewatched Blade Runner 2049. The book's pretty good. The the book is good. It's really weird though. Philip K. Dick is a really weird dude. Um, then there's Philip K. Dick. There's the original Blade Runner movie was actually a lot better than I remembered it being. And the 2049 was as good as I remember it being, which is, I think, a 10 out of 10 movie, to be honest. OG Blade Runner, I think, is like an 8.5 out of 10. It just drags a bit in some parts, but it's overall really good. But, yeah. So, I'm reading a biography of Soren Kirklard, and he is like the master of the gay op. Like his entire life was like one long series of gay ops. Like when he started his like writing career, he had this like I think he had like 24 pseudonyms he published under, and like the pseudonyms had pseudonyms. So like some of his pseudonyms had people who they had like his sock puppets had sock puppets, and they would like argue with each other, and he deliberately would like leave clues to try to mislead people to think that the sock puppets weren't actually him. And it was like this meta game he had where like he insisted that if stuff was republished, it was republished under different names. There is like this really nice girl he was engaged to, and he kind of came to a conclusion that like she was getting in the way of his mission. So he like had this gay op to basically pretend to be a womanizer just so that she would leave him. Um, Goblin Slayer is based. Goblin Slayer has like the highest waifu like to character ratio of just about any anime. To be honest, what was I saying? What was I talking about again? Yeah, so he's like, she's getting in the way of my mission, and she's like, He's like, no woman should have to deal with my autism for the rest of her life. So, yeah, Kierkegaard was a weird dude. He was a really weird dude. And that kind of thing. So, anyways, that's it for the study. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Hopefully I'll be able to do one again next year. Thank you for everyone who watched the stream. Thank you for everybody who participated. I don't know what else